I guess my way, at least, of framing identity, and like you're saying, is I guess what you're saying in effect is what they were doing in the Book of Mormon was they were laying out the game that we're all playing, and then they were saying, here is your part in the big picture, in the game of existence.
Yeah.
And so identity, in a sense, it tells us where we fit in all of this and what our role is, and because of our role, how we should interact with one another.
So the sports analogy is a good one. I would just say it's almost like saying, you know, in that Book of Mormon context, Ammon is telling King Lamoni, hey, we're on the same team.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
The team has an owner. We play for this owner. Did you know that we're on the same team?
Yep.
Oh my gosh, I've grown up hating you my whole life, wanting to kill you, and you're telling me we're on the same team?
Yeah.
You know, it was a huge transition in how he thought of identity, and it's right there in the scriptures. There's a liberal theologian named Richard Rohr, and he drives a lot of people crazy. Sometimes he drives me crazy too. But sometimes he says things that are really that I really like. And he calls Christianity an identity transplant. Like whatever your identity was before, when you have an experience with God and you know, a conversion experience, it's an identity transplant. However you regarded yourself before, it pales in comparison to this new identity.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of putting it, because think about it. We're to be born again.
Yeah.
We're to take upon ourselves the name of Christ.
Yep.
I mean, if these are all statements about identity.
Yep.
Well, one thing you said in your article that I really liked was you said this, and I'll just quote from it directly. Without a grounding in Christianity, our common understanding of God as heavenly parent and humanity as a family have been replaced by atomized rival identities based in politics, nationalism, gender theory, marginalization narratives, sexual orientation, and other aspects of human existence. Any attempt to impose any form of order or boundaries, no matter how loving the motive, will feel like an act of hate. Quick thing on that. Isn't it oppressive to impose our notion of someone's identity on them if they identify some other way?
It cannot be received as anything other than oppressive if they have that worldview, that view of identity. If someone has made something into their identity, and what I mean by that is, and I said this in the article, is if you say, okay, this is who I really am, you people need to accept me for who I am, and this is it. And, you know, you rattle off your sexual orientation or your race or your heritage. You know, I live in Charlottesville, Virginia, and we have white Southerners here for whom identity is about Confederate heritage. And if you do not honor that identity, then it feels like hate to them. They feel kind of, you know, gosh, how do I say it? They feel disrespected. They feel marginalized. And, you know, so that explains a lot of the tension, you know, in some of these places where we have these conflicting identities kind of in the same geographic location.
And that, and it's funny because I would say that's at the root of so much of conflict in human history is people begin to identify with a group and they say, look, my group against your group, we're not on the same team anymore.
Right.
We're not on the same team. And if we're not on the same team, we're competing for resources. You're my enemy.
Yeah.
You know, it's a zero-sum power struggle. And that's a really, I mean, but isn't that the human default? Tribal identity and conflict?
It is. It actually is. And I tried to get this across in that piece is this is the natural order of things. It's the natural way things go is entropy. It's disorder and chaos. There's a Netflix show called The Rachel Divide, and it's about the story of Rachel Dolezal, who, she was like the head of the Spokane chapter of the NAACP in Washington State. And she was confronted at one point by a reporter, and they show this in this Netflix movie, and you just cringe. She's confronted by a reporter who says, "Are you black?" And she's stunned because nobody has asked her that before. And he says, "Are your parents white?" And it sets off, the whole movie is about this. Can you just identify into whatever you want? When you get to this mentality about identity, other people's affirmation, you have to have it in order to sustain this delusion. The only way you can keep this delusion is if other people affirm it to you.
Yeah.
And the minute they don't, it feels like murder. I just got murdered.
Yeah, and they use those terms, They talk about it's violence. My existence has been questioned. And
yeah, that's exactly right. And somebody just, somebody won't affirm that I'm indigenous. Oh my gosh, they just killed me. They just stuck a dagger in me. They murdered me, right?
So, to quote, I'll actually quote what you actually wrote in that in the piece on that. You said, to secure people's compliance, people sometimes go so far as to engage in emotional distortion or extortion, threatening to harm themselves or others unless some aspect of self-perception is validated by other people. This insatiable need for other people's affirmation contrasts sharply with the converted psalmist, whose divinely proffered identity leads to an emotional state described in terms of wanting nothing, like a cup that runneth over. Divine identity does not require validation from others and does not insist the entire world align with one's views.
Right.
That's a powerful statement.
Go read Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. I want for nothing. He leads me beside the still waters. I walk in green pastures. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'm not afraid of anything because you're with me.
Yeah.
My cup runneth over. Like it's such a contrast in Psalm 23. And it's also, language like that is found in other scriptures as well.
I was about to say, it's, you talk about the firm foundation, the building upon the rock, the peace that transcendeth understanding, peace I give you, not like the world giveth.
Yeah.
It's everywhere. And it's sort of like, it's right there in the scriptures telling us that, look, if you want peace, which is not what we see now, if you want inner peace, you have to strip away all the rest of it.
Yeah. You cannot. These notions of identity that we are honestly, so many people in the church are now kind of adopting from the world. They are honestly a recipe for inner turmoil, torment, craving, neediness, insecurity, conflict. They minimize our ability to connect with other people and have, healthy human connection. And that's why, people whose identities are wrapped up in these ephemeral, transitory life experiences, they're just miserable.
Well,